Welcome, everyone. This is Gonzo Herrero, and welcome to the Rise41 podcast. Today, we have an episode that's part of our success series. It should also be part of our regular podcast series. I think it's an important topic. And this was inspired by Chase Irons, a amazing, fun, great bodybuilder here on YouTube who shares a lot of information regarding bodybuilding and so forth. And he put on a video not that long ago where he was talking about the dark side of bodybuilding and explaining some of the things that perhaps are not the best or most positive about bodybuilding. And that got me to thinking, like, how about the light side of bodybuilding, the good things that have come out of the sport over the last 100 or more years, really, when you think about it. So in any case, this video is kind of a compilation where we say thank you to bodybuilding, because this is the sport that actually built modern fitness and so many of the things that the sport has built, so many people now enjoy. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, all right. So today we're shining the spotlight, like I said, on something that's been the foundation, the blueprint, and honestly, the mad scientist behind almost everything we now know related to modern fitness. And we're talking about bodybuilding. So before you roll your eyes and picture the glistening giants on stage flexing like gods, in ancient Greece in the temple and the statues in thongs. Let's hold up for a second. This is about the core philosophy and the methodology that bodybuilders pioneered decades ago that now defines everything from like Orange Theory at F45, is it F45, to CrossFit, to your local dietitian's advice, and everything in between. All of the influencer stuff you see on Instagram and on YouTube. It all is owed to bodybuilding, from macro tracking, protein shakes, carb cycling, glute activation drills. If you train, if you eat clean and optimize, you owe a debt to the iron addicts that came before you. So let's dive into how bodybuilding didn't just change bodies, it rewrote the manual and transformation. And I am one of those people. I find myself talking about this because 7 or 8 years ago, as some of you may know, I had my own personal transformation where I lost almost 100 pounds, completely shaped my life, which was not going very well from a health and fitness standpoint. And bodybuilding was one of the key core concepts that allowed me at home by myself, by following a lot of these concepts, to radically transform my life and change it forever. So, anyway, let's just jump right in. So, the first part, the first segment of this video, let's talk about how bodybuilding invented the fitness playbook. Long before the works functional training or group fitness or CrossFit or any of that hit the scene, bodybuilders were dissecting training like engineers. They were analyzing how this works. So, for example, the split routine revolution. Before bodybuilding, you trained full body or you did military style calisthenics. Bodybuilders introduced the concept of targeting muscle groups, specific ones, with dedicated training days: chest day, back day, leg day, these concepts. This allowed for intensity and recovery to be balanced for hypertrophy, or eventually, when you have power lifters, for strength and so forth. But you get the point. It became, rather than trying to do everything like a shotgun approach with one size fits all, now we're scientifically and specifically targeting certain muscles. So the other idea, very important core concept of bodybuilding, is the idea of progressive overload in practice. And while the principle existed before, bodybuilders put it front and center. They made it sacred. Logbooks, poundage tracking, sets, reps, X, tempo, whatever. This wasn't random. It was basically like a chess match with iron. We're being very methodical, very specific. Next, pioneering periodization. So, off season, pre contest, peak week, these phases became the basis for modern periodization models that are now used by strength coaches and athletes globally. So, depending on your goal, you may be growing, you may be trying to put on muscle, you may have a building phase, a bulking phase, to use some of the parlance. Perhaps you already have a base of muscle you want to lean out for whatever reason. You just want to lose a little bit of fat, be a little bit more mobile, maybe for aesthetics or health. That's fine. Then you could go into a cutting phase. That periodization, that idea came from bodybuilders. That's where it came from. And then the other thing is at fourth, and this one I know could be controversial. So tell me in the comments if you think it is or if you agree or you don't. But bro science, bro science was where we started putting some practices together, and eventually the bro science was validated in large part, or at least gave a direction to real science. So the bros were often ahead of real science because they were experimenting on themselves and tracking variables obsessively and watching what worked in the mirror. You could do observations, the gym and on stage. Your discoveries later eventually got validated by sports science to some degree. Now, it's interesting, I think, that a lot of bro science ends up being like, the bro science may explain something in totally the wrong way, like from a scientific standpoint, how something works, but the practice behind that and the results often match what a scientist can reproduce. But then the science comes behind and says, well, yeah, that does work, but it's not because of what you thought. It's because of this. And that's fine. You marry both together. In the end, it's a methodical, careful, observational model of results that eventually became tested and validated by science. So, another thing to consider. So, a few examples of this would be like Tom Platz's high rep squats now are backed by metabolic stress research, for example, or Arnold's infamous the mind muscle connection, which is part of every PT certification now. That whole idea of connecting your mind to the muscle in order to effectively grow it and affect it. So, again, the big idea, what you come away from this segment is one thing, and it is this: the gym was the lab for bodybuilders, pain was the metric, but the results were the proof. And that's what matters. That's what we get out of it in today's world. All right. The next segment, nutritional strategy, was born in the gym for sure. So bodybuilders weren't just lifting heavy, okay? They were cooking smarter before food scales were cool. Before this was like a thing. Like nowadays, everybody's got a food scale and a strategy. Everyone's familiar with like certain eating strategies or methodologies, certain types of diets in the sense uh, of a framework or methodology for nutritional benefit, if you will. So things that bodybuilders really pioneered, for example, the idea of meal frequency and reality. So bodybuilders popularized that whole 5 or 6 meals a day approach, while science later showed you don't really need that. You don't need that many meals to preserve muscle. This practice helped people control hunger, keep energy steady, and prevent binge behavior. This is an example, a perfect example of bro science, where like we're doing something that we're originally claiming that it worked for a particular reason. Science proves it didn't work for that reason, but there are certainly benefits for some people. If you are somebody who suffers from unstructured eating, if you have an eating disorder, an approach like this might help you start to regulate and be more careful and start developing a healthier relationship with food, where it's not like binge and purge or completely disorganized eating. Another thing that was definitely pioneered by bodybuilders, item number 2, carb cycling and nutrient timing. So manipulating carbohydrates around training, rest days, and goals, that's like a mainstream thing now. But that's now. You know who figured this out in the 80s? That's right. Your favorite juiced up physique modern bodybuilder. That's the dude that was figuring the whole idea of carb cycling and nutrient timing, which is now part of so many methodologies and approaches to fitness. Third one, glycogen supercompensation. So the idea of peak week carb loading before shows, that it shows directly, it led to our understanding, I guess, of how to refill muscle glycogen, which is now applied in endurance sports and post-injury recovery. So it has applications, besides just making somebody look great at a stage show, for a day or two. It actually has practical application. I mean, post-injury recovery is important. Okay, this is something that adds value and quality of life to people who may be injured. Fourth item, cheat meals and the idea of psychological periodization. So bodybuilders knew that if you never allow indulgence, give yourself a break, you are going to break. So refeeds weren't just for leptin or your metabolism, they were morale boosters also. So they were aware of the psychology, not just the physiology of nutrition, which is really, really important, right? Because it's a long game. And the way to win this long game is to have approaches that are sustainable. And the idea of the cheat meal or the refeed or a more indulgent meal is a way to like reset your mental approach to your restricted calorie eating if you have a goal, and makes things completely sustainable, because now you're not thinking like, oh, I'll never have that cheesecake or whatever it is that you have. You now have a strategy. You have something to look forward to while still maintaining whatever discipline needs to be maintained with whatever your chosen nutritional framework is. And then lastly, as far as the nutritional concept that's very much bodybuilder linked, cutting versus bulking, the whole idea of a cyclical approach to caloric manipulation. It's become the go-to for recompensation goals in regular people, not just bodybuilders. This was all contest prep logic, and it was applied to the real world. And it's that whole idea of like, oh, I want to like add muscle. I'm going to eat in a slight, hopefully, slight surplus as I do resistance training to build that muscle. Eventually, I get to whatever goal I am. Perhaps as you know, when you build muscle, you also will inevitably build a little bit of fat or gain a little bit of fat. So eventually you're going to get to a point where you're happy with your muscle, but you want to peel off a little bit of that fat. And then you go into your cutting cycle where you're at a caloric deficit, a slight caloric deficit. And there are many strategies to do that. But ultimately, it's about being at a slight caloric deficit so that as time goes by and you continue doing your exercise, hopefully, right? Because you're going to continue doing that throughout your whole life, you can start seeing the fat disappear and your body composition becomes more optimal, right? Because the lower fat, up to a degree, is better than being obese. Needless to say, we know all of the horror stories about metabolic syndrome, uh, morbid obesity, and what it can do to your health. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. But the strategies of cutting and bulking are strategies that are valid and that can help us to achieve our fitness goals. So the key insight of segment 2, the second chapter, if you will, is this. Bodybuilders created the world's first actionable and scalable diet protocols, and science just cut up and gave them fancier names later. Simple as that. All right, next segment, good things about bodybuilding that you should be thankful for. Exercise science owes the iron game. And what do I mean by that? I mean that almost every exercise term or principle has a dumbbell-shaped origin, or barbell if you prefer. And these are four for you to consider. Hypertrophy versus strength versus power. The bodybuilding world gave us the lens to look at muscle growth as a targeted goal. It wasn't just about getting strong anymore, which is kind of broad. It was about building size, symmetry, and proportions. Do I want to grow the size of that muscle for an aesthetic reason? Perhaps a functional reason. Do I make the muscle the priority to be stronger in order to lift more, say if you're a power lifter, or an athlete in a strength sport, maybe think like shot put or something. All of these things are things to consider when it comes to hypertrophy versus strength versus power. And that lens was originated by bodybuilding. Another concept of exercise science that's really important that came from bodybuilders is the idea of tension, tempo, and volume. So time under tension was the gospel before it was evidence-based. Like bodybuilders knew the longer you had weight and time under tension, under that load, the more muscle you would build, right? So slowing down your reps, controlling the eccentric, maximizing that contraction, they were all designed for maximum growth. And bodybuilders were the first ones who observed this and tried it out, in a repeatable, scientific and documented way, which in turn allows our exercise scientists to validate that tension, tempo, and volume matter when it comes to hypertrophy and strength. The third concept, we mentioned it before, is that mind-muscle connection. The mental aspect of training, visualizing the muscle working, internal focus over external. This was pioneered by bodybuilding pros decades ago. Neuroscience is just now validating it. As we look into the future, into things like Neuralink, like what Elon's doing, right, with Neuralink and applications for people who have served like nerve damage and perhaps their muscles can connect and they atrophy. The idea of the mind muscle connection, this science that was observed by the bodybuilders, is one of the foundations for that approach to, I guess it's almost like a cyborg neurological, technological approach to repair muscle damage and nerve damage. And if we didn't have those observations and that information for the bodybuilding world, we wouldn't know to even go down that pathway and try and help these folks, right? So again, mind muscle connection, important. Fourth, the idea of the pre-exhaust, drop sets, and supersets, like a little bit more complicated. So the intensity techniques, basically, that are now used in strength and performance coaching, they started as bodybuilding tools to beat plateaus. You'd get stuck at a weight. How do I bust through? Well, these are the intensity techniques that would allow you to go around that plateau and break through to get to the next level. And now that's used not just for bodybuilding, but like athletic performance as a whole. These same concepts can be used for sprinters. They could be used for football players, for linebackers trying to like stop somebody. They could be used by running backs. That combination of quick running and so forth. The idea of these intensity techniques to break through those plateaus. Again, there are some modern parallels. For example, S&C coaches use these principles in rehab for injury prevention and muscle activation protocols. That glute bridge warm-up your physical therapist gave you, that was stolen from probably a bikini competitor's prep, I would imagine. So, in conclusion, bodybuilders force the fitness world to treat muscles like organs that could be precisely influenced and not just moved, okay? You could actually influence that organ. So, food for thought, guys. All of that you can thank bodybuilders for. All right, segment 4, chapter number 4, the idea of meal prep, biohacking, and kitchen alchemy, all the magic that we do. So before there were meal kits, before MyFitnessPal, then way before TikTok and meal prep and all that nonsense, there was the bodybuilder fridge. And what was that about? Well, again, 4 concepts. Precision nutrition, the first one. Bodybuilders knew exactly how much chicken, rice, and broccoli to eat because they weighed it. There was no guessing. That approach made dieting scientific, measurable, and repeatable. Okay, so all of a sudden, now we have, again, something scalable, measurable. I can see how much food I'm eating, how I'm consuming, and I can log how I react to it. Am I gaining weight? Am I losing weight? Am I keeping weight? That kind of, how do I feel? Next important concept that bodybuilders pioneered, and it's now very common, the whole idea that prepping food ahead equals compliance. So by removing decision fatigue, they stuck to the plan because remember, bodybuilders had to stick to that plan in order to be successful in their sport. So, they inspired entire industries. Personal meal prep businesses, plastic container brands. Now we have AI tracking apps. All of those, Factor, all of those, Lean Nation is another service. All of them come from the basic concept of prepping ahead, which means you're removing decision fatigue is one. Second, you're improving compliance because by removing the decision fatigue, you're also removing the temptation to, oh, now I'm hungry, I'm in my office, I'm stuck working, what am I going to do? I guess I'll call Uber Eats or something and have a burger delivered. You don't do that when you prep because you go to your trusty fridge, even in your office, because you brought your food, right? And then you go there, you warm it up, ready to go. You're healthy. You can get along and move on with your day. Third, nutritional biohacking and kitchen alchemy item to mention, the idea of functional foods and micronutrient timing. So using cinnamon, for example, for insulin sensitivity, some taking fiber supplements to slow your digestion, say, using sodium to manipulate your vascularity, how vascular you look on stage, say, water loading or depletion to influence that scale weight and the look of your muscles. All of that came from bodybuilding. And these are techniques that, for example, actors in Hollywood will use nowadays in order to have a certain look. And, if you're a diabetic, for example, the idea of cinnamon for insulin sensitivity or berberine, all of these things came from bodybuilding. The idea of supplementing with fiber, which is very good for your lipids, by the way, for your lipid profile, not just your gut health. This, again, um, came from bodybuilders who wanted slow digestion so they wouldn't bloat, say, before a show. All of this stuff comes from there. And then the fourth thing is the kitchen lab mentality, right? Bodybuilders understood how to cook for effect. So it's bland during prep, flavorful during the off season. You volumize with veggies. It's calorie dense when you're bulking, right? Because you need those quality calories. All of this is now mainstream in cutting edge diet coaching. So a diet coach, prep coach, uh, absolutely knows all about this. And this is, again, something that was discovered and used and tested for decades by bodybuilders. And now it's used for, if you have that fancy chef or service, uh, depending on your goals, you can very, very quickly and very scientifically approach the food and food prep that you make in order to achieve your goals. You can thank a bodybuilder for that mindset, for that concept. So let's give you something actionable. These are the top 3 meal prep habits that you should steal. If you get nothing else out of this video, steal these 3 things, okay? 1, if you can, cook protein in bulk. 3-day batches max because you want to keep it fresh. But protein takes a while to cook. Figure out proteins that you like and the way you like to prepare them in bulk. And then you can always fridge and or freeze. You get your Tupperware, you measure it out. And then you always have something that's delicious, nutritious, ready to go. And like we mentioned before, you remove that decision fatigue. You know exactly what you're eating. You know how much it measures. You know how many calories. You know the macros. Easy to comply. Second, have 2 or 3 spice and sauce combos that you like that are low calorie, hopefully, to avoid palate fatigue of eating the same thing over and over. One of my hacks, personal hacks, is I have a friend he is a world class chef, uh, and I'm not gonna name names, but he is one of my best friends here locally. He taught me how to brine and marinate chicken breast, which usually chicken breast is dry and tasteless and horrible. But with his technique, where I've learned how to brine chicken, I can prepare chicken breast that's actually tender, juicy, flavorful. And one of my hacks is I have a variety of different sauces, hot sauces. All of them are 0 calorie because a lot of hot sauces are not high in calories. And that allows me I make chicken tenders, I measure them out, grill them, air fry them, actually, even better. And then I use different hot sauces with them, and it makes it seem like it's not the same meal every day. That's one hack, for example. So again, depending on what you like, dry rubs are usually good because again, no calories. Be careful with sauces because they can definitely add a ton of carbs and or sugar for some of those barbecue sauces and so forth, or your honey mustards. You got to be careful with those. I'm not saying don't use them, but if you do use them, make sure that you track, if you're tracking your calories and so forth, or that you account for them, if that's your preference. And then the third item, label and timestamp your containers because that discipline breeds consistency. Once you get used to this, it is so easy. It takes no time at all. I literally do my meal prep in between watching stuff on Netflix with my wife. It's no big deal. Once you figure out what is repeatable to you and what it is that will allow you to be compliant and to stay within what your nutritional needs are. So again, top 3, cook protein in bulk, 3-day batches max for freshness. You don't want longer than that because ick. 2, have 2 or 3 spice or sauce combos, preferably low calorie, so you can avoid that palate fatigue. And 3, label and timestamp your containers so that you always know. And also, by doing this, discipline breeds consistency. And that consistency equals success later on. All right, next chapter. Chapter 5, mindset and discipline. Bodybuilding as let's call it a master a masterclass, a mental masterclass. Let's call it that. So the aesthetic is what you see, right? You see the bodybuilder and the guy that's in great shape, that's awesome. But what you don't see is the mindset that built it. And what am I talking about? Here's some concepts for you to consider. Concepts you can thank bodybuilders for. So the first one is radical ownership. You are your own result. You have no one to blame. Bodybuilders don't outsource that effort. They internalize the process. And this has massive carryover into business, parenting, and leadership. So there is absolutely a correlation between that radical ownership and that concept, and not just your physical results, if you will, from your physique or your fitness journey, but also your personal life, your business life. I mean, the carryover is incredible. Again, into everything: business, parenting, leadership. You don't outsource it, you own it all. And by taking ownership of it, you become better at it because you're invested. Okay. Second, mental and discipline bodybuilding concept is habit mastery. So, what do I mean by habit mastery? So, getting up early in the morning. I always get up early in the morning. Doing your fasted cardio every day. Prepping your food. In the case of a bodybuilder, competitive bodybuilder, it might be daily posing. Like they practice that every day. It's no motivation. It's a machine of habits that takes over when willpower dies, because willpower does eventually wear out, and so does motivation. Motivation is emotional in nature. Okay. I feel motivated to do something. You might feel motivated today, and guess what? Tomorrow you're going to be tired. You're not going to feel motivated. If you're counting on just motivation to get it done, it ain't getting done if you're not motivated. So that's where discipline comes into play. This habit mastery. It's really a code word for discipline, because when willpower and motivation die, discipline is what's going to get you over the hump so you can continue doing the things that will make you successful. Okay. Next one, goal setting and reverse engineering. You've got a show in 16 weeks, says the bodybuilder. Break down every phase, reverse engineer the look. You use that feedback to course correct, and that same system can be used by high performers across a variety of fields. And what do I mean by that? I have a project X. I'm going to build an app. Let's say that's my project. I've got 6 months to do it. Okay, the result is this app. So how do I reverse engineer the process to design the app? Well, now I'm going to need to test the app. I also need some time to develop the app. I'm going to need some time to debug the app and troubleshoot it. I'm going to need some time and you start laying out the foundation all the way to the back, right? I need to conceptualize the app. I need to have a framework and some wireframes and a design of what the app is going to look like. All of these things now you've reverse engineered, and now you have a way to set those goals, and you can look at it and be like, oh, 6 months might not be enough time. I actually need 8, maybe I need 12. But that whole concept of taking a goal that may seem daunting or very difficult and creating a plan to achieve that and sticking to that plan, that's goal setting, and that's reverse engineering. Okay. And that is a concept that bodybuilders might use to get to a show, but you can use in just about any field or discipline. It's the same concept. Okay. It's the same idea. And then another one, man, grit and suffering tolerance. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. So when you're 5 weeks out, man, and your carbs are 50 grams a day, it's not the bicep that's keeping you going. It's going to be your mind. That resilience builds champions in and out of the gym. So the idea of the grind, of being able to power through, of being able to take a deep breath, and hold it in your gut and grind down and push through. The idea that suffering and grit are part of life, and they're part of anything worth doing. Nothing worth doing or keeping or having comes easy. If it comes too easy, you probably don't even care about it. Even if it's a good thing, you won't appreciate it because you didn't suffer for it. You didn't pay a price for it. You weren't invested in it. It just happened. And it's very similar to like people who are given something and they don't take care of it, because that's human nature. If you earned it, you're far more likely to be protected, to be careful, because you know how hard it was to get or achieve whatever that is. So that idea of grit and suffering as a way to achieve something, as the obstacle is not necessarily meant to be avoided. You can have that stoic Marcus Aurelius approach of, the obstacle is the way. The obstacle may be what makes going there worth it, or what that goal is, or that achievement that is at the end. It's it's that ability to, like, grit your teeth, grind down, and get it done. Again, learning to tolerate that discomfort it's a superpower. It's a superpower that will allow you to achieve great things. All right, next chapter. So, well, before I move on, let's turn it into a key point, or summarize what that means. So bodybuilders basically taught the world to embrace the suck and stay locked in on long-term results. That anything worth doing long-term, it's going to be hard, but you got to grind into it. But you have to do it in a smart, repeatable way. You have to have a plan. You have to have that tolerance for when the plan is in execution. And you have to have that long-term view and the ability to also, when possible, have those habits mastered, because the more habits you have mastered, the more on autopilot you do a lot of the work, the easier it becomes to do the stuff that you couldn't predict, that you couldn't plan for, because now you have cycles, you have availability, you have mental bandwidth to handle that, because your habits are handling all the heavy lifting, all the grunt work, all the foundational work, because you've already planned for it. So again, embrace the suck and stay locked in, and you'll get your long-term results. All right, chapter 6, segment number 6. Let's call it supplementation and the biohacking crossover. Lots of fancy words in this one, right? So bodybuilders walk so that biohackers like me could sprint in their toe shoes. And so what are we talking about? For example, the idea of supplementation, like creatine, whey, BCAAs. So these were all popularized and tested in bodybuilding before entering the mainstream. Clinical research validated a lot of these supplements and approaches decades later, and the bros already knew. They knew that creatine has a good effect from a muscular performance standpoint. They might not be able to tell you exactly why back then, but we know now. We know how it works. Whey protein. Why is it important to prioritize your protein in your nutrition? Well, in order to build muscle and to stay healthy and to eat and be satiated. All of these things. So they're very important, and they were tested by bodybuilders. Again, a lot of the supplements that we're now looking at, um, the bodybuilders were the first ones who pioneered this. So again, if you're taking an off something that may have seemed off the wall 10 years ago, but now you swear by magnesium for sleep, all of these things were pioneered by bodybuilders and tested on the road to trying to game the best way to present that, that perfect look on stage. Another concept that was huge in the bodybuilding community that's now fairly common, the idea of fat burners, thermogenics, and nootropics. So what am I talking about? So contest preppers were the first to stack like caffeine and yohimbine, to experiment with ephedrine, to use L-carnitine strategically. This became the template for metabolic stack formulations, which biohackers now use, right? You hear a lot of mitochondrial improvement nowadays. That's another big one. All of this stuff was pioneered by bodybuilders because they wanted that edge, man. They wanted to be able to effectively, lose fat and get in shape for the show. So they were the ones who actually started playing with all these things. You've heard of clenbuterol, arbuterol, all of these different compounds and how they work, DNP, all of these things. Again, bodybuilders were the ones who experimented with those things, figured out what worked, and now science is catching up. Third one, big one, peptides and hormonal optimization, which is critical, especially, I believe, as we get older, it becomes even more and more critical to be hormonally optimized. There is nothing like having your hormones completely balanced and being insulin balanced to your quality of life. I mean, as somebody who started TRT uh, about coming on a year now, not even that long, I can tell you in my case that my quality of life went through the roof. In my case, because I was very testosterone deficient. Not really terrible from a numbers perspective. I think my lowest was like 300, 350, which is low, but still in what they call the range. But the range, being in the range and being optimal are two completely different things. And let me tell you, once you get your hormones optimized, you will feel like the world went from black and white to technicolor. Okay, it's a whole different way to live. So the idea of knowing about or understanding IGF-1, growth hormone, insulin modulation, TRT for men, and for women, hormone replacement therapy also. Every cutting edge anti-aging clinic owes its tools to performance enhancing experimentation from bodybuilding circles. Bodybuilders were the ones who started playing around with this stuff back in the day, T3, T4, desiccated thyroid, all of these things bodybuilders would play with in order to try and get into that edge. And now that's part of the, I guess, anti-aging slash biohacking community. There's definitely overlap. I mean, that's how I landed into the bodybuilding space. I actually came at it from the biohacking space. So then the fourth one, the idea of supplement timing. So think of carbs, intra-workout carbs, maybe some pre-workout vasodilators, post-workout recovery stacks. All of these are commercialized now. You can actually buy this stuff pre-made, but that's thanks to bodybuilding trial and error. Those guys were the ones who well, what happens if I take a little bit of caffeine before my workout, or, add some, I don't know, goodness, I'm drawing a blank, um, some sodium, some electrolytes, to my pre-workout drink, maybe some B12, niacin. What would that do? All of those ideas, all of that research, bodybuilders did that, and that in turn created an entire industry now, basically. So, I guess the final point here is that when people say biohack, I, I think most bodybuilders just kind of smile and nod because they were doing it in Gold's Gym in Venice before it was a TED Talk, man. They were just doing it. So anyway, the last segment. Let me just close this podcast out with some things, maybe to like a little thought provoking, or at least for you to consider. So, what everyone should learn from the sport of bodybuilding. I'll just leave this as a great little conclusion, if you will. Whether or not you ever plan to step on stage, you should steal liberally, shamelessly from bodybuilding. Do it because it taught us how to plan. It taught us how to measure progress, and it taught us that transformation is never accidental. Okay? It is very much deliberate. You don't need steroids or PEDs. That's beyond the scope of this. Okay? But what you do need is structure. And it doesn't matter if the stage in your life is the gym. Your stage might be a boardroom. It might be an office. It might be a relationship. It might be your own mental health journey. The playbook for all of this is exactly the same. And this is where the success mindset comes into play, to realize that there are some principles that are universal for that success. Again, it doesn't matter if it's the gym, the boardroom, it's a relationship, your mental health, the office, work, whatever it is. The playbook is always the same. And the playbook is you have a vision, you create a routine for success, you observe and gather your feedback to see if it's working, and you are consistent. Those four things will guarantee your success in whatever endeavor it is that you put yourself into. As long as you have that. Again, the vision to set that goal and to reverse engineer what the goal would look like, the routine, which are the steps that you will actively take, the how you're going to get to realize that vision, the feedback as you go, you'll be paying attention to what works and what doesn't, modifying as necessary and adjusting as necessary. Okay, think of a guided missile. It's not a cannonball flying and just trying to land it somewhere near your target. It's a guided missile that as it goes, you get closer and closer to your target, you will adjust to ensure that you're on target. That's where the feedback comes from. And the last one is consistency. Consistency is absolutely the last one, because consistency is what keeps you on the plan from the beginning through execution to your finish. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. So, Chase, I think this might be the light side of bodybuilding. Hopefully, you'll watch this, and hopefully, all of you will get something out of it. So, I hope you walk away with a new respect for the sport of bodybuilding, how it laid the groundwork for modern fitness, for optimization, for biohacking, for discipline. And if this fired you up, man, you can drop a review, share it with your gym buddy or your coach. Follow me on socials at Rise41_podcast on YouTube and Instagram. Recently, I started uploading some stuff on TikTok. And if you're ready to take your transformation to the next level, contact me at the link tree. There's a link at the bottom. DM me for coaching. And until next time, this is Gonzo reminding you to stay jacked, stay geeked, and always keep rising. Peace, and I'm out. Hope you enjoyed that.